What's going on, everybody? This is Hot Rod bringing you the Season 1 preview for Hard Knocks, a Madden 16 Online CFM on PS4. It's an exciting time for us as Madden is now out. We all have the game. We've all seen some of the changes that they brought in this year. I'm going to be bringing you record predictions based on the picks from 5 guys in the league, as well as burning questions for each team. So without further ado, let's get things started with the NFC North. We start things off with the Bears led by GTG. The quote-unquote experts have the Bears going 10-6. Our key questions for Chicago starts with Jay Cutler. How long is he going to be part of the Bears organization with his questionable skills? So far he hasn't delivered in Chicago, so they'll be looking for some improvement there. Secondly, can Kevin White replace Brandon Marshall's production? Is going to be a big factor in the Bears' success this year. And finally, can that 3-4 defense show some marked improvement, leading to a resurgence of defense in Chi-Town? Moving on, we have Third Alarm's Lions. After the loss of the Ndamukong Suh, Haloti Ngata was brought in to replace him in the middle of that defensive line. What will Ngata's impact be for Detroit this season? Secondly, how long will it take for the rookie running back Ameer Abdullah to take the starting job from Joique Bell? Abdullah boasts more athleticism than Bell, which would make the run game more dynamic. And finally, can Eric Ebron have a breakout year? He has the raw talent, but he needs to get some of those looks on offense to have a productive year. The Lions are projected to go 5-11. Next up is the Packers, led by Coach 3, who should be one of the contenders for Season 1 and projected to go 11-5. Obvious question is, who's going to be able to stop that Packers offense? They boast a ton of talent across the board, which is going to make them tough to stop. On defense, with a permanent move to middle linebacker, how will Clay Matthews and his long flowing hair hold up for a full season? Green Bay hopes he can stay healthy. Finally, is Eddie Lacy poised for a huge season? With so much attention to the Rodgers and the passing offense, huge holes can be left for Lacy to do some damage. Wrapping up the NFC North is the Vikings, led by a controller abuser. A big key for Minnesota is the progression of Teddy Bridgewater. Can he ascend up the ranks of the NFL quarterbacks? Part of that will depend on his connection with Mike Wallace, who steps in as the number 1 wide receiver. Can he be that big-time wide receiver that they have been missing in that offense? And finally, we all know Adrian Peterson is the cornerstone of the Vikings. Will we start seeing a decline, or will we continue to be the freak of nature on the field and have a big season? The Vikings are projected to be 1-15, but I see them doing much better with that young talent. Let's go to the NFC South, a division with a couple new faces in the league. We start with the Bucs, led by Jeff Hartle. The Bucs hope that they have their franchise quarterback and number 1 pick Jameis Winston, but will that poor offensive line stunt his growth? The Bucs will probably need a productive running game to ease Winston into the NFL, but who's going to lead that ground attack? I assume Dunn Martin is going to get that first shot, but can he make the most of it? On the defensive side of things, a big key will probably be the pass rush. Will it continue to be the weak link, or can the Bucs see some improvement there? With these questions, the experts project them to have a rough year at 1-15, but hopefully they can top that in the competitive NFC South. We have our first new owner in Claxamillion, who leads the Falcons this year, projected to go 7-9. A factor that could lead to success this season will be the Falcons' run game. However, we don't know who's going to lead that group. Maybe it's going to be a 2-man approach with Devontae Freeman and Tevin Coleman. Defensively, the Falcons need somebody to step up. Will it be the rookie Vic Beasley, or maybe somebody like Desmond Trufant? Finally, the Falcons need Matt Ryan to be an elite quarterback. He's getting paid like one, and he has one of the best wide receivers in the game in Julio Jones. The time is now for him to put up some elite numbers. Now let's take a look at Blazers Carolina Panthers. Our first question is, who's going to be their number 2 wide receiver? We all know about Kelvin Benjamin, but out of Jericho Cotchery, Ted Ginn, and Corey Brown, who's capable of being Benjamin's partner at wide receiver? Carolina took Shaq Thompson with their first-round pick. Is he ready to take his starting gig at outside linebacker? If he does, the Panthers have a super athletic linebacking core. And the last question relates to the loss of Greg Hardy. Now that he's moved on to the Cowboys, who takes his place? Is it possibly Mario Addison? The Panthers are projected to win the South at a 10-6 record. We finish up the NFC South with the Saints, led by the Bayou Chef, another new member of Hard Knocks. The Saints are projected to go 6-10 this season, as we question if this is the beginning of the end for Drew Brees. He's starting to get long in the tooth, and he's without his favorite target, Jimmy Graham. After the nasty departure of Junior Gillette, how will the Saints defense fare? With a lack of dynamic pass rush, they could struggle. And finally, as I mentioned earlier, Jimmy Graham has been traded as well as Kenny Stills. Who's going to pick up the slack in the receiving corps? I'm sure the Saints will look to Brandon Cooks to be that guy. Now we head to the NFC East, leading off with the Cowboys, led by our colleague commish, Bob Jr. The Cowboys are projected to go 11-5 due to the talent on that team, especially on the offensive line. Which brings me to my first question. Can the run game thrive without DeMarco Murray? They now have to move forward with Joseph Randle and Darren McFadden, but will they end up getting another guy off the street to compete for the job? There's going to be a new pair of defensive ends in Dallas. Will Greg Hardy and Randy Gregory boost that pass rush? Conventional wisdom says yes. And finally, can Tony Romo get over the hump? He needs to strike while the iron is hot with the wealth of talent that he has around him. We move on to the Eagles, led by Pitt for life. They're projected to go 7-9. This season, they've decided to roll the dice with Sam Bradford. Can Bradford hold up for a whole season? Their options after Bradford are quite suspect, so needless to say, their season is probably dependent on his health. One way to help that is to feed newly acquired DeMarco Murray. But will Murray be the type of runner that can be a better fit in the Eagles' offense? And lastly, can the Eagles' defense stop the pass? They paid a lot of money to Byron Maxwell, but traded away Brandon Boykin, leaving a void in the secondary. Next is Neurotic Truth's Giants. The Giants are projected to have a 5-11 campaign, and the first order of business is to determine Eli Manning's future with the team. Eli is set to become a free agent after the season, and depending on his production, the Giants might see fit to go younger next season. One guy who they do feel comfortable with is Odell Beckham Jr., but is he the real deal who should be mentioned with the likes of Antonio Brown and Calvin Johnson as one of the best wide receivers in the game? Finally, after adding Shane Vereen, which running back will get the majority of touches on offense? Can Vereen be an every down back? Last up in the East are the Redskins, led by yours truly. The Skins got a projected 13-3 record, but that might be very generous as Washington has serious questions on both sides of the ball. The most important of those is whether RG3 can be a long-term option at quarterback. He has some accuracy issues as well as health concerns, so can RG3 regain his form? Also important for the Redskins is whether the additions of guys like Terrence Knighton, Stephen Pailla, and Chris Culliver can make that defense better. There's still deficiencies in the secondary that could offset the influx of talent. Lastly, can that offensive line hold up against a stronger defense? They get early tests with Miami and St. Louis, so that question will be answered fairly quickly. We now wrap things up for the NFC by going to the West. This year, the Cardinals are led by MG, and they get a projected record of 10-6. Our first question for the Cardinals is, how much does Larry Fitzgerald have left in the tank? Michael Floyd is becoming the lead guy in that offense, but Fitz is still important. Can he put together a solid season for the Redbirds? Another key for the Cardinals is Andre Ellington's health. This is quite important because they don't really have much behind them besides Chris Johnson. And finally, can the Cards defense be one of the best in the league? They boast a lot of talent, especially with a very strong secondary, which could help them be very competitive this year. Next, we have the 49ers, led once again by Kimura. It's well known that the Niners experienced quite a bit of turmoil this past offseason, so we wonder how do they respond after the mass exodus of the likes of Patrick Willis, Aldon Smith, Chris Culliver, and Justin Smith, just to name a few. Another question for San Fran is whether Colin Kaepernick can show some progress at quarterback. He still has Anquan Bolden and Vernon Davis, as well as new addition Torrey Smith, so he needs to step it up. Finally, we wonder if Aaron Lynch is up to the task of easing the pain of losing Aldon Smith. Kimura is a fan of him in real life, so I'm sure he's going to do his best to make Lynch a factor in his defense. With all these major questions, the experts didn't feel too optimistic about the Niners season and projected them to be 2-14. We now go to the Rams, led by our sole Egyptian league member, Zikri. The Rams are projected to win the NFC West with an 11-5 record. There's a lot of hype surrounding Todd Gurley, who many pundits felt was the best running back prospect in the draft. What will his impact be in his rookie season? Are there still going to be injury concerns? This offseason, the Rams also shipped out oft-injured quarterback Sam Bradford for Nick Foles. Have the Rams finally found their answer at quarterback, or will Foles provide a new set of issues at that position? Finally, is that ultra-talented Rams defense poised for dominance? They have the likes of Aaron Donald, Robert Quinn, and Chris Long, and that's only the defensive line. This defense will be a force to be reckoned with. Our last team in the NFC is the Seahawks, and another new member to Hard Knocks, J-Face. We know the Seahawks have a boatload of talent, but when you assemble so much talent, you eventually have to start paying them. Will the huge contracts that they've recently shelled out finally start to catch up to Seattle? A big acquisition this offseason was the trade for Jimmy and Graham. Graham gives Russell Wilson a huge and highly skilled target, but we don't know what Graham's ultimate impact will be. Will this be a point of emphasis of Seattle? Finally, will one of those wide receivers separate themselves as top dog? Seem like they are a bunch of guys that play all at the same level. Someone needs to step up there. That's it for the NFC. Time to check out the AFC team, starting with what should be a competitive division, the AFC North. This year, the Bengals are led by Dan Thrax and are projected to go 4-12 in Season 1. Dan is already kind of iffy on Andy Dalton, so our first question is how much patience will the Bengals have with him? If they have a rough season, will he be the scapegoat? One player that might be a key target for Dalton is Tyler Eifert. Now that Jermaine Gresham is gone, he's unchallenged as the #1 tight end. Can his talent finally translate into top 10 production? Our last question is if that defense can live up to the hype. They aren't short on talent, especially on the front seven, but they're going to face a bunch of dynamic offenses this season, so we'll see if they're up to the task. Next, we have Sean Mason's Cleveland Browns. Like the Bengals, we start with the quarterback position as we ask if this is a make or break season for Johnny Manziel. He needs to prove himself this season to warrant a long-term investment by the Browns brass. However, that brings us to another major question: if there's enough talent for him on offense. Jordan Cameron is gone, and there's no true #1 running back out. And outside of Josh Gordon, who can they rely on at wide receiver? That puts a lot of pressure on the defense to keep them in games, and one big cog in that unit will be Danny Shelton. Will he become the next great nose tackle under Sean, who is very talented with that defensive line? Browns are projected to go 7-9, so the experts feel that the Browns can be competitive this year. Broth gets his hometown team in the Baltimore Ravens, and they're projected to be another 7-9 team in the division. Broth's known as an offensive guy, so we're interested to see how quickly Brashad Perriman can get acclimated in his offense. With Steve Smith entering the ranks as one of the oldest skilled players in the league, Perriman will have to give the Ravens confidence that they didn't reach on him. Speaking of old age, will age catch up to the Ravens defense? There's no denying the talent, but guys like Terrell Suggs, Darryl Smith, and Elvis Dumerville are all on the wrong side of 30. We'll see if the young talent will show us that the future is bright for the Ravens. And finally, can Joe Flacco put together a consistent season? With questions about whether or not he belongs in the elite category, he needs to show it on the field and not just in flashes. Last up in the AFC North are the Steelers, led by Big Tub. If you look at the roster, one thing that stands out is that glaring hole in their secondary. Troy Polamalu is gone, so there are questions at safety, and the cornerback situation is questionable even with the addition of Brandon Boykin. Will the secondary be able to stop anybody? There may be a lot of shootouts in store for Pittsburgh because a lot of people are wondering if the Steeler offense can be one of the best in the league. Big Ben, Le'Veon Bell, and Antonio Brown are the upper echelon of their respective positions, so there's potential for a lot of yards and points for that offense. Our last question is that pass rush, and who will be the guys providing the heat on the quarterback. So far, Jarvis Jones has been a disappointment, so he needs to step it up. AFC South, starting with the Colts and Night Nose. The Colts are poised for a strong season, and the experts predict a 13-3 record for Indy. However, we do wonder if the deficiencies on defense will hold them back. Outside of Vontae Davis and Robert Mathis, nobody else stands out on that defensive unit. And for as much as we talk about the talented Andrew Luck and wide receivers like T.Y. Hilton and Andre Johnson, there still need to be some run game for a successful season. Can that be a factor with old man Frank Gore and not much behind him? Lastly, who's going to take that number 3 wide receiver job? Dante Moncrief has shown flashes, but the Colts drafted Philip Dorsett early, so there might be a push for him to get some playing time. All in all, it should be a fun year in Indy. Next, we have the Jaguars featuring Hit 'em Hard. The Jags are projected to struggle this year with a 3-13 record. If you look at the wide receiver position, you wonder what the Jags can get out the passing game. Blake Bortles hasn't developed as they hoped yet. However, he hasn't had much in terms of a big-time #1 target. Maybe Julius Thomas can give him that boost. With this being a young team, they need somebody to step up and be the leader, especially on the defensive side of the ball. Maybe the super talented Dante Fowler can fill that role. He certainly looks the part. And finally, can the Jags be competitive week in and week out? With a lack of talent, there isn't anybody expecting a Super Bowl, but this team can show progress by staying in games. Now to Houston and Jay Mustang's Texans. After being #1 pick, Jadeveon Clowney wasn't much of a factor his rookie season, so the obvious question is, will he show up in year 2? If he can realize his potential, him and J.J. Watt will be a devastating duo on defense. Another intriguing question surrounds the quarterback ballot and who will get the nod between Ryan Mallett and Brian Hoyer. Our money is on Ryan Mallett, who boasts a big arm. Our last question is about the future of Arian Foster. He's very injury prone and has lost a step. Will the Texans look to move on from him earlier this season? The Texans are projected for a 7-9 season, which isn't bad. Just give them another year or two to assemble talent, and they'll be a real factor. Rounding out the AFC South are the Titans, led by our height. There's a lot of buzz surrounding Marcus Mariota, but does he have enough pieces around him to have a successful rookie year? Guys like Kendall Wright and Delaney Walker are going to have to help out the rookie quarterback. We also have to see if their second-round pick from 2014, Bishop Sankey, can prove his mettle at running back. If he doesn't pan out, it could lead the defense to sending a lot of people after Mariota. A big signing for the Titans was Brian Arakpo, brought in to boost the pass rush. Will he be a big contributor, or will he flame out as he did in DC? The Titans are projected to have a 7-9 record, which would be impressive with that roster. On to the AFC East. The Bills this year are led by Raitai, one of the stronger players in the league. Because of that, the experts predict a 13-3 record for Buffalo. But despite that, one major question that we must ask is who will be under center. E.J. Manuel, Matt Castle, and Tyrod Taylor don't exactly excite you, so it'll be interesting to see who they go with. One player that does excite the Bills is LaShawn McCoy, who was inquired in a trade with the Eagles. How is he going to fit within this new team? I'm sure the Bills are going to make him a focal point in their offense. On the other side of the ball, is this going to be the best defense Buffalo has seen in years? With a stout defensive line as well as a strong secondary, the Bills' defense could be treacherous. Next up is Frisk and the Miami Dolphins. Frisk is another player with a strong reputation, and the Dolphins are projected to have a nice 11-5 season. The big signing of the offseason was Ndamukong Suh, so we wonder how big of an impact he'll have this season. Miami already has a good defensive line, but they could be one of the best in the league this year. On offense, Mike Wallace was shipped out, so that leaves a hole at #1 wide receiver. Who's going to be the guy that steps in? Jarvis Landry, perhaps? And one guy that this affects is Ryan Tannehill, and we wonder if he can continue to ascend the ranks of the NFL quarterbacks. Up in New York, McGriff Jr. once again takes the helm of the Jets, Jets, projected to go 12-4. He inherits a messy quarterback situation, but looking past that, can Brandon Marshall continue to put up big numbers? I think that will be a big factor in the success of whatever quarterback they decide to go with. Is it me, or do the Jets have like 7 running backs on that roster? When you have that many, it means you're unsure who you want to carry the ball. So will they have one guy or a committee? Defensively, Darrelle Revis returns to the Jets. Will Revis Island, as well as the re-addition of Antonio Cromartie, bolster that defense? Our last team in the AFC East is Sporty's Patriots. The Pats are projected to go 1-15, but we're looking for Sporty to improve on his Madden 15 struggles, and I think he will. The big question for New England is how much longer Tom Brady will be playing at a high level, but you never know. He may decide to hang up the cleats after this season. With Darrelle Revis signing with the Jets, will the lack of a true #1 cornerback spell doom for the New England pass defense? Another big change will not be having big old Vince Wilfork at defensive tackle. Taking his place is Jabal Sheard, who's much smaller yet still talented. Can he be a good replacement for Wilfork? I think Sporty's going to enjoy more success this time around in New England. We've now reached the home stretch with the AFC West. First, we have the Denver Broncos, led by Smalls. The Broncos are projected to go 9-7, which might be a little disrespectful given the amount of talent in Denver. We all know about Peyton Manning's arm strength issues, so we wonder how much he has left in that right arm of his. Will Smalls have the confidence to sling it around the field? On defense, the Broncos let Terrence Knighton, aka Pot Roast, go. Will they miss having that big mammoth on their defensive line? They have some unknowns remaining at that position, so that very well could be the case. Finally, another guy to let go was Julius Thomas. That means Virgil Green steps in as starting tight end. Can he make that transition seamless? Denver needs to make the most of this year. Next up are the Chargers, led by Emo. First and foremost, the big addition was the first-round pick, Melvin Gordon. Can he live up to the hype at running back, especially with a couple other guys behind him itching to get some playing time? Another question mark for San Diego is their pass rush. Who can the Chargers rely on to fill that role? Outside of Melvin Ingram, I'm hard-pressed to pinpoint a guy who can produce in that group. That might be an issue for him. And finally, we ask if this is the beginning of the end for Antonio Gates. He has bad knees and has lost several steps. There's no denying he still has the skills, especially in the red zone. However, time might almost be up for him, and Ladarius Green might be taking more meaningful snaps. Moving on to Kansas City, we have the Chiefs, led by new member Jay Sims. The talented Chiefs are projected to have a 13-3 season. Travis Kelce has a lot of talent and is probably one of the most athletic tight ends in the game. Can he become one of the next greats at that position? Sims likes to go to his tight end, so I expect some big numbers for him. But the Chiefs have some questions at wide receiver. They brought in Jeremy Maclin, so will his addition improve that pass game? And on defense, Eric Berry returns after his bout with cancer. Can he regain form as one of the top safeties in the league? Our last team of the preview are the Raiders, led by Guy, aka UA grad. We have the Raiders projected for an 8-8 season. Guy wants to throw the ball around, so will the addition of Michael Crabtree and more notably first-round draft pick Amari Cooper translate into a potent offense? Also related to that, will the Raiders have a run game be a point of emphasis? It'll be smart for them to utilize the shifty Latavius Murray. Our last question is whether that defense led by Khalil Mack can hold its own. They are mostly young but have a couple vets like Justin Tuck and Charles Woodson. They're going to face quite a few talented offenses, so they'll have a tough task week to week. Rounding things up, we have the playoff teams in the NFC being the Redskins, Packers, Rams, Panthers, Cowboys, and Bears. In the AFC, we have the Bills, Colts, Chiefs, Steelers, Jets, and Dolphins. However, this could all be totally different by the time we finish up Season 1. It's going to be a competitive league, and we're looking to have a lot of fun this year. Thanks for watching, guys.